Imagine, for a moment, that everything you believe about awakening is wrong, not slightly off, but entirely inverted. We're told that enlightenment is serene, peaceful, a gentle rise into bliss. Yet the ancient sages whispered a far more unsettling truth, one so shocking that it was buried beneath centuries of comforting myths. They taught that the first true moment of seeing is not peaceful at all. It is disturbing. It shakes the very architecture of who you think you are. This video unravels that forgotten teaching, saying too from the Gospel of Thomas, "When he finds, he will be disturbed." A riddle left behind by mystics who understood that the doorway to Gnosis does not open into light. It opens into disruption. Tonight, you and I are going to walk into that doorway. We'll begin by stepping into the shadows of forgotten history, where this saying was whispered among initiates, guarded like a sacred flame. We'll explore why ancient teachers insisted that the first glimpse of truth is not comforting, but destabilizing. And we'll reveal how this disturbance isn't a sign of failure, but the unmistakable mark that you are touching something real. Then, as we journey deeper, we'll decode the psychological, spiritual, and metaphysical layers hidden within the phrase. What exactly is being found? Why does finding it cause such turmoil? And why do so many spiritual seekers spend their lives avoiding the very revelation they claim to seek? Finally, we'll bring these mysteries down from the clouds and into your daily life, with practices designed to lead you through the doorway of disturbance without losing yourself in the process. Because here's the secret: the disturbance is the threshold. It is the hinge on which illusion breaks. It is the first heartbeat of awakening. If you've ever felt shaken on your spiritual path, if old patterns have crumbled, if reality has begun to unravel, if something inside you whispers that the world isn't what it seems, then you are already standing at that threshold. And this video will show you what lies on the other side. Let us begin. To understand why the ancient masters insisted that finding leads first to disturbance, we must journey back, not just centuries, but into the very heartbeat of early mystical teachings, where truth was never presented plainly, and knowledge was given only in riddles, symbols, and veiled sayings. The line we're exploring, "When he finds, he will be disturbed," comes from the Gospel of Thomas, a text discovered in 1945 near Nag Hammadi in Egypt. But its origins stretch far deeper than the soil that hid it. The Gospel of Thomas is not a narrative like the more familiar Gospels. It is a collection of sayings, cryptic utterances that resemble Zen koans more than theological doctrines. Scholars believe some of these sayings may predate even the earliest canonical writings. They represent a thread of Christianity that was mystical, introspective, and experiential, closer to a spiritual science than a religion. In these early Gnostic circles, knowledge, Gnosis, was not intellectual. It was transformative, and transformation, they understood, rarely feels gentle. Imagine the world as they described it, a vast spiritual landscape shrouded in layers of illusion, constructed from inherited beliefs, cultural conditioning, and the deep sleep of the human psyche. According to many Gnostic traditions, humanity is not fallen so much as forgetful. We wander through life like dreamers who have forgotten they are dreaming. So when someone begins to awaken, when they find, the first thing they encounter is not bliss, but disorientation, a cracking, a rupture, a disturbance. This idea appears not only in Christian Gnosticism, but across ancient civilizations. In the mystery schools of Egypt, initiates underwent dramatic rites meant to induce psychological and spiritual shock, symbolic death before rebirth. In the Eleusinian mysteries of Greece, participants were guided through moments of profound existential confrontation. Early Buddhist teachings describe the first stage of insight as the knowledge of terror, when the seeker glimpses impermanence clearly for the first time. Even in the yogic traditions of India, the awakening of Kundalini is said to shake the body and mind, destabilizing the old self before revealing the higher one. Different cultures, different languages, different metaphysics, but the same principle. The beginning of truth disrupts the illusion that sustained you. So why has this idea been buried? Because disturbance is inconvenient. It doesn't sell well, it doesn't comfort. It doesn't fit neatly into the modern narrative of spirituality as a path of ease, positivity, and instant gratification. Over centuries, institutions shifted the focus from inner revelation to external obedience, from personal awakening to collective conformity. Disturbance, the trembling before transformation, became an undesirable side effect, even a sign that something was wrong. But the mystics knew otherwise. They preserved this teaching in symbols, in hidden texts, in whispers across time. If you are disturbed, you are close. You are brushing against the veil. And now, in our age, a time saturated with distractions, shallow interpretations, and spiritual shortcuts, returning to this ancient idea is more crucial than ever. Because disturbance is not a detour from awakening, it is the gate. With this context laid before us, we can now dive deeper. In the next section, we begin unraveling what exactly is being found, and why the finding shakes the seeker at the roots. When you're ready, we'll continue. To understand why finding leads to disturbance, we must first ask, what is it that the seeker actually finds? Most people assume it is enlightenment, or peace, or some hidden cosmic truth. But the ancient sages point us towards something far more intimate and far more destabilizing. The first thing the seeker finds is himself, not the polished, curated identity presented to the world, but the inner architecture of consciousness that has been hidden beneath habits, assumptions, and unquestioned beliefs. The finding is not an external revelation, it is a mirror turned inward with merciless clarity. And when the truth of one's inner condition is revealed, disturbance is not just expected, it is inevitable. Imagine a person who has lived their entire life in a house with dim lighting. They believe the place is orderly, familiar, comfortable. But one day, the lights suddenly blaze on, revealing dust in the corners, cracks in the walls, clutter piled in spaces they never bothered to inspect. Nothing new appeared. The mess was always there. What has changed is the level of awareness, and that shift feels like a shock. The Gnostics understood this intimately. They knew that before someone could awaken to the divine spark within, they had to confront the layers of illusion, self-deception, and inherited narratives that form the false self, the constructed identity built from childhood, society, trauma, and unexamined desire. When this false identity is exposed, even glimpsed, the ego trembles. It feels like death because, in a sense, it is. This is the disturbance. It's the moment the seeker realizes, I am not who I thought I was. The world is not what I believed it to be. My mind is filled with borrowed truths. This realization is not gentle. It shakes the foundation of everything. And yet, this shaking is necessary. For just like a seed must split open to grow, the old self must be cracked for the true self to emerge. The ancients used powerful metaphors to describe this rupture. In Hermetic teachings, it is the shattering of the shell. In Kabbalah, it is the breaking of the vessels. In Sufi mysticism, it is the burning away of the nafs, the lower self. In Taoism, it is the moment of discontinuity, when the mind's grasp on fixed reality dissolves. But perhaps the clearest metaphor is that of waking from a dream. In a dream, everything feels real. The landscapes, the characters, the emotions. When the dream breaks, there is often a moment of confusion, even fear, as the mind struggles to reconcile the dream world with the waking world. The Gnostic disturbance is that exact moment, except instead of waking from a nighttime dream, you awaken from the dream of your perceived life. But here's the paradox. The disturbance is not a sign that something is wrong. It is the sign that something real is happening. Most people who begin a spiritual journey encounter this stage, but do not recognize it. They think they're failing. They think they're regressing. They think they're losing themselves. In truth, they are beginning to find themselves, and the ego interprets this finding as a threat. This is why saying two is not just descriptive, it is prescriptive. It warns the seeker. Prepare yourself. Awakening will unsettle you. Because without this warning, many would turn back the moment disturbance appears. Ancient teachers understood that those who avoid disturbance remain stuck in the surface-level spirituality of comfort and wishful thinking. Those who pass through disturbance enter the deeper path, the path that leads to transformation, Gnosis, and liberation. In this first part, we've looked at the emotional and psychological disturbance, the shock of seeing yourself clearly. But there is a second, more profound layer of disturbance, one that challenges the very structure of reality itself. In the next section, we'll dive into that deeper level, the metaphysical disturbance, the unraveling of the world you thought you lived in. When you're ready, we'll continue. If the first disturbance is psychological, the shock of seeing yourself, then the second disturbance is far more radical, the shock of seeing the world. Because once the inner illusion cracks, the outer illusion cannot remain intact. When the seeker finds, he doesn't merely uncover hidden parts of himself. He uncovers the hidden architecture of reality. And this is where the disturbance becomes cosmic. For the ancients, the world was not a fixed objective stage upon which life unfolded. It was a layered construct, a tapestry woven from perception, belief, and consciousness. They understood that the external world reflects the internal one. As above, so below. As within, so without. And when the inner distortions begin to dissolve, the world outside seems to shift, as though revealing a deeper pattern beneath the surface. This is why early mystics often spoke of awakening as a kind of second sight. They weren't referring to supernatural powers, but to a profound shift in perception. Things once taken for granted suddenly reveal their strangeness. Social systems appear artificial. Institutions seem hollow. The routines of daily life feel like rituals performed in a trance. Even language, our most basic tool of meaning, appears insufficient, crude, like a net trying to catch the ocean. This is the metaphysical disturbance. It is not madness, it is clarity. It is not chaos, it is the unveiling of order. But to the unprepared mind, clarity can feel like madness, and unveiling can feel like chaos. The Gospel of Thomas, like many Gnostic texts, teaches that the world we experience is not the ultimate reality, but a veil, an interface. The disturbance arises when the seeker senses that veil and perceives its fragility. It's the moment when the familiar world becomes strange, as if lit from a new angle, revealing shapes and shadows previously unseen. The Hermeticists described this as the cracking of the cosmic shell. Buddhists call it the dissolving of the skandhas. In Neoplatonism, it is the sudden recognition that the material world is only the lowest echo of the higher realms. Even the indigenous shamans of the Americas speak of a moment when the world becomes transparent, when one can see through life rather than simply at it. And yet, despite these profound parallels, Modern spirituality often avoids this deeper layer of disturbance. It's easier to sell peace than existential upheaval. But the ancients did not sanitize awakening. They honored its power. So what exactly does the seeker find at this stage? They find that reality is not as solid as they believed. They find that meaning is not inherited, but created. They find that consciousness is not a passenger in the body. It is the source from which experience flows. This revelation can be exhilarating, but it can also be terrifying. Because if the world is not fixed, if the self is not fixed, then everything becomes fluid. And with fluidity comes responsibility. The seeker can no longer blame fate, society, or circumstance. He becomes a co-creator, a participant in the unfolding of existence. This is the true disturbance. Not fear, but a freedom. Raw, unfiltered freedom. Freedom from identities. Freedom from inherited narratives. Freedom from the illusions that keep us small. And yet freedom, when first encountered, feels like falling. The ground disappears. The walls dissolve. The structures that once defined life melt away, leaving only awareness itself. This is why ancient teachers guided initiates carefully. The shift in perception must be integrated slowly, or it can overwhelm. The disturbance is not meant to break the seeker. It is meant to break the illusion. But there is one more secret hidden within saying two. Disturbance is not the end. It is the middle. Because after disturbance comes. And after wonder comes recognition. And after recognition comes peace. The deep, abiding peace that arises not from ignorance but from understanding. Yet that peace cannot be reached without passing through the fire of disturbance. And those who avoid the fire remain trapped in a world they never question, confined to a self they never explore. In the next section, we will leave the philosophical realm and step into the practical. How does one walk through disturbance without losing their center? How do you integrate this awakening into daily life? And how can you turn disturbance into transformation? Now that we've explored the psychological and metaphysical dimensions of disturbance, the question becomes, what do you actually do with it? Because disturbance, unintegrated, can feel like free fall. But disturbance, understood, becomes initiation. The ancients never intended these revelations to remain abstract or untethered. Their teachings were practical, lived, embodied. They knew that awakening must be grounded, or else it becomes chaos. So, they passed down techniques not to suppress disturbance, but to transform it into insight. Let's explore a few of these methods. 1. The practice of witnessing. When disturbance arises, confusion, identity tremors, existential questioning, the instinct is to fight it or analyze it. But the first step is neither. It is simply to watch. Sit in silence and become the observer of your own inner landscape. Notice the thoughts without chasing them. Notice the emotions without labeling them. Notice the sensations without resisting them. This ancient practice appears across traditions: Vipassana in Buddhism, hesychasm in early Christianity, self-inquiry in Vedanta, and the watcher at the gate in Hermetic teachings. The principle is the same. What you can witness, you are not controlled by. What you can observe, you can transcend. What you can see clearly cannot disturb you. In time, disturbance transforms into data, signals pointing toward the illusion that is unraveling. 2. Grounding through the body. Awakening is not only a shift in consciousness, it's a shift in energy. Disturbance often generates tension, restlessness, or disorientation. The body becomes the anchor. Ancient practitioners used breath work to stabilize the nervous system, walking meditation to reorient the mind, simple postures or mudras to redirect energy, cold water or grounding rituals to return awareness to the present. These methods prevent the seeker from drifting off into abstraction. They ensure that the transformation remains embodied, not imagined. A powerful technique is the 3-breath reset. 1. Inhale deeply through the nose. 2. Hold for a moment. Feel the body. 3. Exhale slowly through the mouth. Repeat 3 times. It sounds simple, but it interrupts spirals of disturbance and returns you to yourself. 3. Journaling the cracks. Disturbance often reveals contradictions, beliefs that no longer fit, or parts of yourself you didn't want to see. Writing them down externalizes the chaos. It becomes a map, not a maze. Try this prompt. What belief is collapsing right now? Write without censoring. Then ask, what truth is trying to take its place? This turns disturbance into dialogue between the old self and the emerging one. Krishnamurti. 4. The ritual of asking better questions. Most disturbance comes from questions that the mind is not equipped to answer. So instead of asking, what's happening to me? Why is everything falling apart? Why do I feel lost? Ask questions like, what illusion is dissolving? What am I afraid to see? What truth is revealing itself through this moment? A question is a doorway. The wrong question leads back into confusion. The right one leads forward into clarity. 5. Reframing disturbance as initiation. Here is the most powerful shift. Disturbance is not a breakdown, it is a rite of passage. In Egyptian mysteries, the initiate was intentionally placed into a symbolic death. In Greek rites, they were guided into darkness before seeing the light. In shamanic paths, the healer undergoes crisis before gaining vision. Gnosis demands disturbance because truth rearranges everything. So when disturbance arises, say, quietly, internally, this is the threshold. Let me walk through it consciously. This reframes the entire experience and aligns you with the deeper current beneath the surface chaos. 6. The path of integration. As insights emerge from disturbance, integration becomes essential. You can integrate by speaking with grounded, wise individuals, reducing external noise, returning to nature, limiting stimulation, practicing consistent routines. Integration is not about holding on to the old self, nor about forcing the new one. It's about allowing transformation to unfold without rushing or resisting. Disturbance is the storm, integration is the clearing, awakening is the sky behind both. The ultimate transformation. When you learn to navigate disturbance, you gain something extraordinary: the ability to remain centered even as your reality changes. You discover that who you are is not the one who is disturbed, but the awareness in which disturbance appears and dissolves. This is the beginning of Gnosis, not as a concept, but as lived experience. In our final section, we will weave everything together and reveal the deeper message hidden within saying two. We'll explore how disturbance gives birth to understanding and how understanding gives birth to peace. We've traveled far, from the hidden chambers of ancient wisdom to the deepest layers of the human psyche, from the shock of self-confrontation to the cosmic tremors that reshape our understanding of reality itself. And now we arrive at the heart of saying two's mystery. When he finds, he will be disturbed. What the ancients tried to tell us is simple, yet profound. Awakening is not the soft glow of spiritual comfort. It is the spark that burns through illusion. The disturbance you feel on the path is not a mistake. It is not a sign of failure. It is the confirmation that something true is being uncovered. Because the moment you find even a hint of the real, you inevitably brush against the unreal. Old identities tremble, old beliefs crumble, old assumptions dissolve like sand in water. And while this can feel like chaos, it is the very beginning of clarity. Disturbance is the threshold. Gnosis is what lies beyond it. The early mystics preserved this teaching, not to frighten seekers, but to prepare them, to remind them that spiritual shock is not the enemy, it is the initiation. A test that reveals your readiness to step beyond the surface of life and into the deeper, more luminous reality that waits beneath. And here is the final revelation. Disturbance is temporary. Understanding is permanent. Once the storm passes, a new stillness emerges. A stillness born not of ignorance, but of insight. A peace that cannot be shaken, because it is rooted in seeing things as they are, not as you were conditioned to believe. This is the peace the sages whispered about. This is the clarity the Gnostics guarded. This is the awakening behind the words. So as you move forward on your path, hold this teaching close. When you feel the tremor of inner chaos, when the world suddenly tilts, when your old self begins to dissolve, remember, you are not breaking, you are transforming, you are not falling apart, you are falling awake, you are not losing yourself, you are finding the one who was always beneath the noise. If this journey resonated with you, share your thoughts below. Let's explore these mysteries together. And if you're ready to go deeper into teachings like this, consider joining this channel's growing circle of seekers. Because the path to Gnosis is not meant to be walked alone, but it is meant to be walked with courage. The disturbance is only the beginning. The revelation is yet to come.